So, good afternoon, ma'am. I am Junior Rose King, a third-year student of West Visayas State University, currently taking up Bachelor of Elementary Education, major in General Education. So, one of our requirements is to conduct an interview about transformative education. Before we start, can you please introduce yourself?
Okay, good afternoon also. I am Ma'am Cheryl May Sataya, teacher 3 of Aram Skills, and I'm teaching English.
So, pila ka naman ka-years nga nag-teach, ma'am?
This coming September 2023, I will be celebrating my 18th year in the Department of Education.
So, bali, malawig-lawig naman.
Tigo lang na, in short. In other words, I mean.
Sa kadugayon mo naman, ma'am, sa service, I'm sure damo ka naman, ma'am, sang may na-encounter ng mga situation sa classroom. So, start na tamang sa question.
Okay.
What is your idea or perception about transformative education, and do you apply this to your profession?
Okay, in my own perspective, when you say transformative education, it is geared on one's goal of making each learner a happier and a more productive learner, and at the same time, it is not just more on acquiring knowledge, but it is more on influencing students or motivating them to become a critical learner, critical thinker, and develop also their skill in terms of making decision. Yes, that's it.
So, in applying transformational learning in practice, how do you promote an ideal learning condition? Sa mga estudyante, ma'am, sa imong classroom, paano mo ma-promote ang ideal nga kasinig nga ang ini nga classroom condition, okay, gini siya kay muon sa imong classroom.
So, as a teacher and at the same time as an advisor, the first thing that I do every time I encounter a new set of pupils each year is that I make sure that I understand them, I know them, because for me it's the foundation of making learning more effective. It is important to understand, to have a background check of your pupils, the family background, and many things that influence their behavior, their performance, and even the way they think in classroom.
So, what effective instructional methods do you often use?
In terms of applying instructional methods, I apply the so-called cooperative learning, wherein I am more on making my pupils engage through group activities. Then I am not a type of teacher who talks a lot. I am more on giving my pupils time to think, to do outputs, to do performances, and one thing is that I always make sure that every time they make their mistakes, it's a chance of learning, because mistakes, we should perceive mistake not as a correction only, but it's a chance to change the way they think, the way they see things.
There is always a room for improvement. So, how can teachers like you create an emotionally safe classroom?
Okay. First of all, it is very important that teacher should be pupils friendly, and to be able to make sure that you are promoting an emotionally safe classroom. Just what I mentioned a while ago, it is also important to have a background of your pupils, so you should understand their behavior. What I mean is that you should not jump into conclusion. For example, if one child is misbehaving in the class, it is not correct to to reprimand them right away or to warn them in a harsh way, but you should also understand why they behave such way. So understand or know first their family background, because out from that, you will be able to understand why this child behaves that way.
So, what activities or tasks do you employ or do to ensure engagement of students?
Most of the time, I have this group activity, but if the chance won't permit, I also involve my pupils in activities such as dual activity, triad. I'm more on games, and sometimes we have this performance task like dramatization, reenactments, and other activities that involves grouping or cooperative learning.
So, all of these activities fall on the authentic assessment, right?
Yes.
Okay, so students can also enjoy and at the same time learn. So for our next question, ma'am, do you also let your students practice journal or blog writing? Why or why not?
I haven't tried blog writing, but most of the time I practice and encourage my pupils to have journal activity, especially in the first and second sections wherein they have really that skill in terms of writing. I also tried that in the last section, but as of now, medyo struggle pa sila sa reading. That's why they can't compose even a simple paragraph. So, gina-guide ko lang sila. So, what I did is that may may starter lang, then they will complete that one. At least, in very simple way, they can express their ideas or opinions. And for the first and second sections, yes, most of the time I have journal writing, essay writing, and since I am also teaching journalism, I also involve them in editorial writing.
So for our next question, as an elementary teacher, how do you teach your students self-awareness about knowledge?
It's really challenging for an elementary teacher to teach elementary students or pupils, I mean. But I tried my best to make them aware that. What's the question again?
How do you teach students self-awareness about knowledge?
But I tried my students, I encourage them that it is very important it is very mindful to get knowledge or to acquire knowledge. But I also teach them that in getting or acquiring knowledge, you should also be mindful that you get such knowledge from a reliable sources. Because nowadays, we have the so-called, there is a lot of misinformation, especially ang mga kabataan. Subong, dasig sila magpati sa mga fake news. So, I always remind them to be a fact checker. Is importante, gid na siya. Because sometimes, kung gahatag ko sa ilang mga assignments, especially nowadays, nga nagbago nga itong curriculum, no? So, not everything can be found in textbook. So, they have to browse the internet, to do research. So, I told them that in acquiring knowledge, you should be mindful that what you are getting from the internet or from a source comes from a reliable source.
So, kanami, gali ma'am, no? Kay sa early stage pa lang nila, sa grade 6 pa lang, ma'am, gina-practice na gali ma'am nga dapat mangin mindful ka sa ginagamit mo ng mga
And one thing, in addition, I do find time in reading their journals, in reading their essays, and I also remind them that plagiarism is dangerous. So, in giving information, you should see to it that your write-up should not be plagiarized. Because I browse the internet, I surf the internet from time to time, and I do check the outputs. Halin, doon nabasahan ko na ni. Doon nakitaan ko na ni. That's why my pupils are aware that my teacher, our English teacher, is also a researcher, and I should be careful that my outputs really comes from my own brain.
Okay, so thank you, ma'am. So for our next question, so earlier you have already mentioned that you are using authentic assessments move on to our next question. What can you advise to pre-service teachers like me, especially sa pag-apply malamang sa transformative learning or transformative education?
I think transformative education is the opposite of traditional education or traditional teaching. And as a seasoned one, what I could advise to you as pre-service teachers is that you should be open-minded. And you should give your students a chance to think. What I mean is that we should not rely all the time on textbook. We should give also our students the chance na inablang makathink sila, makatag sila sa ila kaugalingon. For example, nung may isabi ka fact nga nakuha sa textbook, dapat i-check naman nga ina siya nga book, ina siya nga reference is updated. Also, what if ang bata naghatag sang updated one and still you insist? Because you also insist that you are superior than your students. What we insist ka nga amugin ng instructor. So as pre-service, dapat open ta. What if mag-abot ng instance na galit nagsala ka, we should accept also that your students or your students in the future will learn from you, and at the same time you will also be learning from them. And one thing is that as siguro mga modern nakamusin nga time gumahire na kamo sa DepEd as modern teacher, dapat aginhatag taman nga mga info sa mga bata updated man, especially if you are teaching literature, if you are teaching grammar, sometimes may mga updating nga ginatawag. So dapat aginhatag tayo sila updated. And I also, one thing pagit is that i-influence kita mga bata to be productive. Because nowadays, makita mo na gid ang mga bata nga instead na ma-transform sila to become better, though ang social media is may negative impact sa mga bata. So, wala may useless ba ng tanan kung ang behavior gid sa bata. So, dapat as a pre-service teacher, nang dira pa lang naintindihan tanang-tanan, no? Tapos, you should also understand that each student is peculiar. So, dapat naintindihan tagid ang natawag ng individual differences. Because one thing cannot be applied to everyone. Dapat kada bata may kaugalingon ka nga approach. But you should be open to that. Individual differences.
Thank you, good ma'am. Namadamo kayo kami na tunaan sa'yo, ma'am. Thank you for your time.